Hello everybody. This is the class 4 in the Emerging Trends in XML Translation class. We are taping. I just want to make sure that I see everything that's going okay. Everything seems to be okay. So off we go. Hopefully we are taping. This is the 4th class in Emerging Trends in XML Translation, as I said before. So this is going to be a video for this class. I will first of all go to my course content in D to L, and I will look up the slides for today, and I will download today's slides, and I will put them in my ET directory, in my class downloads directory, and save them there. And then we will begin today's class. Okay, so let's go get those slides. Okay, it's taking its time to open these slides. That's interesting, but we'll just let it go. As I've said often before in these videos, unless I make an egregious error, I'm just going to continue on, and this is one of those cases. Okay, so today's class is on TMX and TBX. This is session 4. As I say often, these slides cover the concepts covered in the 4th session, TMX and TBX. This is an online session. As we normally do, the first row here, the April 19th row, is on today's slides, TMX and TBX. So hopefully before this session you were able to read the article on reuse with TM and TMX, read the TMX specifications, part 1, 2, 3, and 5, read the introduction to term-based exchange at that URL there, and then read the the TBX specification at that URL, parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Reminder, next week will be an in-class session. We will have a quiz on XLIF Core, TMX, and TBX. And before then, please read a practical guide to XLIF 2.0, chapters 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. Those will cover the XLIF modules, and that'll be an important part of this class. Okay. So preparing for today's class, I'm going to kind of orient you to how this story goes. So remember, we talked about the paradigm for this class is that we're a startup company, and we are not blessed with a lot of resources, but we are blessed with a lot of good practical knowledge and experience. So we're going to do our startup company along those lines. So let's look at the story as it's unfolded so far and where the story will go. So challenge 1, and this is a review from things we've already covered. Do we send the native source files directly to our translator or localization service provider? The answer is only if you want it to cost top dollar, take a long time, and have errors. In other words, no. Converting it to XLIF is the solution to this challenge. Okay, so now we're moving into today's slides. So this thing I'm sending contains several segments that I've already translated in the past. Isn't there a way to leverage the already translated segments? Answer, yes, as long as you and your localization service provider have been saving your translation pairs in the form of TMX files. In other words, save your translation memory in a file format that we can use. But wait, can't I just store them in a spreadsheet? Answer, using the open standard lets you transfer translation memory from vendor to vendor, and it's directly accessible to the computer-aided translation tools. Okay, challenge 3, and this is also being covered in today's class. In my industry or my company, there are a lot of terms that could be ambiguous to the translators who are not necessarily experts in our field. Also, we want to make sure certain items are always translated correctly, consistent with my company's style guide. Can I send a glossary of terms to the translators to keep all of this straight? Answer: store the glossary in TBX files. The tools can read these directly, and TBX defines standardized ways to store and use useful metadata about terms. And again, since this is an open standard, you can pass it from vendor to vendor, and they will understand it. I see I have a little typo there that I'll have to fix. Okay, so challenge 4, and this is a future class. My segment granularity varies, and my TMX files and TBX files are not leveraging things that I know I've captured. It seems my XLIF is sometimes segmented at the phrase, sometimes at the sentence, sometimes at the paragraph, and sometimes at whole list items, sometimes at list items, sometimes at whole lists, etc. Isn't there a way I can tell XLIF and tell my localization service provider how to segment consistently? It says constantly. That's a typo. In a way that best works for my business. Answer: yes. Use SRX. It's an open standard, it's supported by the tools, and it works. Challenge 5. I struggle to convey best practices to my content providers in terms of preparing the source content in ways that will be optimal for the translation and conversion to XLIF. I wish there was a way I could add processing for localization and translation directly into my docbook, DITA, SVG, HTML files, etc. Answer: you can. It's called ITS. You can put a ton of great translation aids right into your source XML with tools. And best of all, it's all turnkey with HTML5. So again, that's for a future class. And then finally, for the future class, I'm at odds with my localization service provider as to how to measure their translation efforts and how much I should pay. Going by word counts for some of it, but for many languages like Japanese and Chinese and others, there is no such concept as a word. What metric can I use cross-paradigm? Answer: GMX. This has all been solved and in a way that is unambiguous and traceable to an open standard. Okay, so that's kind of where we are in the story. We've already learned about XLIF. Today we're going to learn about TBX and TMX, and in the future we'll learn about a couple of other standards. So let's jump right into TMX. TMX is all around translation memory and storing translation memory in a file format. So TMX is Translation Memory Exchange. It's an open standard for the exchange of translation memory. Its URL is there. Translation tools use TMX to leverage and add to translation memory. TMX 1.4b specification passed a while ago, April in 2005, with a specification and an XML DTD. So backing up a little bit, translation memory enables the translation of segments, sentence, paragraphs, or phrases of documents by searching for similar segments in a collection and suggesting matches that are found. And then there's a definition there by the that's found at the Max Programs website. Okay, so conceptually, here's how that works. We start with any XML file. In this case, it's a DITA file, and we have a couple of paragraphs there. Nirvana was an American grunge band from Aberdeen in the state of Washington. The Clash, founded in London 1976, is considered one of the most influential early punk bands alongside other bands such as the Ramones and the Sex Pistols. Soundgarden is an American grunge band from Seattle. So we've got these three paragraphs, and we know that we have translation memory around some of those, a TMX file. So what we would do in our computer-aided translation tool is we would open the XLIF file, and then this is the way it would, the XLIF file would be in our computer-aided translation tools. We've converted the DITA XML into XLIF, and now it's ready for the translators to translate. But the translators want to leverage the TMX file, the translation memory, so they click the Add TM file, and they find their TM file, and the TM file then is presented to them in their computer-aided translation tool, and the computer-aided translation tool says, do you want to use this as your translation memory? As you can see, and we'll see more detail of this later, we have a TMX file which has TUs and TUVs we have in each TU a TUV, one with the source language, in this case English, and the target language, in this case German. So we see on this screen that we have we've already once paid for the translation of that paragraph about the Clash and also about Nirvana. And if you were to scroll down, probably more matches that we could leverage. So in this case, the translator would say, yes, I want to add this TMX file. And so the TMX file looks like this. It's got, as I said before, the language pairs English and German, English, German, English, German. So we want to leverage all of these translation memory segments that we have already paid for, approved, etc. in previous cycles. So we won't go over this until we get to the translation, or excuse me, to the XLIF modules. But in this case, we would leverage one of those modules that's called translation candidates. So it would interrogate the translation memory TMX file and check it against segments in the new translation we want to do. And in that case, it would then add these modules, these XLIF modules. So in this case, just looking at the first one, we see that we have this namespace called MTC, which is for the XLIF 2.0 matches module, or translation candidate module. So we store the source and the target, the previous translation, and this is offered to optionally be presented to the translator, and they can make the determination if they want to use that as the translation. Okay, so when they open that XLIF file that has the leveraged TM in the MTC namespace, a computer-aided translation tool will recognize that and will say, we have a match in this case. Would you like to view the match? And so that button is highlighted in yellow in this case. If you press that button and say yes, and then leverage that, then you can see in that first string that the translation candidate entry that was put into the TMX, that was put into the XLIF file, was indeed accepted by the translator. So we see about midway there we have the translation that was leveraged. So in this case, we're not paying the translator to translate that string again. We're simply leveraging an existing translation. And if you repeat this thousands of times, your cost for the translation goes way down. Okay, so then after we've accepted all of the translations, we now have an XLIF file that has these translations leveraged, which we did not have to pay a translator to do. We simply leveraged the translation memory. Okay, so then we convert it back to its original format, in this case DITA, and we see that we have that same topic now, which is the exact same hierarchy, but in this case now it's German, and it has the German segments that we leveraged from the translation memory. Okay, so let's pause there. That's the what we would call the theoretic or the academic. Let's actually see this in action. Okay, so I'm going to just show you how to use a utility that we will use in this class. Now I'm going to show you how to create a translation memory file from a TBX file, excuse me, from an Excel file. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to go to my utility, which is in my resource. I'll go back to course content, and I'm going to go into resource files, and I'm going to scroll down now to the TMX utility. I'm going to download this, and I'm going to put it in my ET directory, but I'm going to just put it at the root of my ET directory. So I'm going to just save this. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into my ET directory, go back into my root directory, and this process, by the way, is the same in Mac or Windows, so you'll be okay following these steps. So now I have my TMX utility. If I were in the Mac, I would double click it and it would unzip, but on the Windows I'm going to say extract all, and I'm going to let it put it right there in my ET directory. Okay, so I'm going to extract it. Okay, so now I have the utility right in my ET directory. So I'm going to go into that utility, and I'm going to notice that there is a user guide. Okay, so if I follow on in the slides, I'm down to this step here where I've downloaded the utility and I've unzipped it, and now I'm supposed to locate the TMX Utility user guide doc file and follow the directions. So that's what I'm going to do. And I hope that you will do this at home. After I've shown you how to do this, please pause the video and please go through all of these steps. Okay, so I'm going to look at that set of instructions. Okay, so the TMX utility, let's see, I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see better. Hopefully that's readable now. I'll do it one more. Well, that's a little bit too big. Trying to get this zoomed in so that it's readable. Okay, so that's probably pretty good there. Okay, so the TMX utility is a command line XSLT utility that converts translation memory spreadsheets into a TMX file. This was written by me, so if you find any bugs, let me know and I'll fix them. This is just a little utility that I made for the class. So the instructions are download the TMX utility zip file from D to L resource tabs, unzip it in the ET folder such that it creates a folder called TMX Utility. We've done all of that. Okay, so it says to create a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel. In the first column, enter source segments. In the first row of the first column, enter the source language. In this case, it'll be English US. And in the second column, this is where the translations go. And in the second column, the first row, enter the target language. So you can go about this two ways. As you see, there's already a sample version of this in the utility that we unzipped, and it has all of this. You could try with that, but I'm just gonna. This is a little bit different. When we do the TBX utility, you actually would start with the template that I gave you. But in this case, it's so simple. I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to get a new. Spreadsheet, and it's just so simple that I'll just do it as if I'm starting brand new. This is what you would probably do for your project. This, by the way, is not our project. This is just to show how it's done. So in the first cell, I'm going to type EN-US, and in the second cell for this exercise, I'm going to say that we're going to translate. Let's see, we've got kind of a Star Wars theme, so we'll translate it into Wookiee language. So that's the Chewbacca character on Star Wars, so just for fun. And so my first phrase I'm going to type will be this is fun, and in Wookiee language that is translates into Gaw, Roar, Humph. Okay. I'm just making all of this up, obviously. Here, I'll blow this up a little bit so it's more readable. Okay, so then the second language pair that we're going to already have translated is going to be let's start the ship. And in Wookiee, that's more hack. Gak. Humph. And then we'll just do one more. I'm hungry. And in Wookiee, of course, that's like mwak. And we've never actually heard Chewie use the word yummy, but let's just say that's it. Okay, so we'll save that. And what do our instructions say to save it as? Save it, we're going to save it as my TMX, and then we'll do step 4. Okay, so we'll save it as my TMX, and we'll save it right in that same utilities directory. So I'll go to ET, utilities, it's here, and then I'm just going to call it, what do we say, my TMX, just call it that. Okay, so we've saved that. So now we just have the Excel file. Well, with this Excel file, you could hand this to a translator and it would help a little bit, but it's not something that the computer-aided translation tools can use natively, and it's not a file format that you can use to populate a translation memory database, for example. So we really want this to be a TMX file. So the next step says save the Excel file as XML spreadsheet and name it mytmx.xml. So in this step, it's really important that you do it the right way. So in virtually all versions of Microsoft Excel, there's an option to save as XML spreadsheet. So we do save as, and then we're going to save it as XML spreadsheet. In my case, it says XML spreadsheet 2003. I've seen it 2005, 2008, whatever. Just make sure you pick XML spreadsheet, and then it's going to want to name it mytmx.xml. That's absolutely fine. And it's just going to warn us that some of our formatting is going to go away. We'll say that's okay. Okay, so now it has saved as mytmx.xml. Okay, so we could actually look at this in a text editor. So why don't we do that? And we see that it's got a bunch of XML in there, and then within it is our XML for our translations. Again, you might say, why can't we just hand this XML file? And it would be the same reason. It's better if it's TMX because that's the standard for translation and translation memory exchange. All the tools use it, etc., etc. My usual reasons. Okay, so I'm going to put that down. And then the next step says that I need to invoke a command line. So in Mac, we would do that by going into Utilities and double-clicking the Terminal app. In Windows, we would go to our Accessories folder and we would call up the command prompt. So that's what I'm going to do since I'm in Windows. So I'm going to go into Accessories somewhere, and I'm going to get my command prompt. Okay, so that gave me a command prompt. Okay, so then the next step is to navigate to my TMX utility folder. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. Basically, the first thing you want to do is to change directories to your desktop. Okay, and then if I do a dir, I see that one of my choices is ET. In the Mac, that would be LS, and you would see that one of your choices is ET. So I'll do a CD to ET. Okay, if I do a dir, I see that one of my choices is TMX Utility, so I'm going to change directories to that. CD TMX -utility and do a dir. And sometimes in Windows, it gives you, when you extract a file, it gives you the same directory name twice. So I'm going to CD to that. And I actually did a shorthand there, TM star, since there was only one there. Same thing would work in the Mac. And if I do a dir, I see that I have all of my files there. Okay, that's what I need. And remember that in our XML module, we learned about XSLT. That's actually what we're going to be using here this utility is written in XSLT. So one of the files that you see there is saxon9.jar. So let's go back to our instructions. And we've changed directories to there. And it says to type this command line. So I'm going to do that right here at the command prompt. I'm going to type JAVA space minus JAR space SAXON9.jar space minus O for output space, and I want to call it my TMX dot TMX space, and then the input file is my TMX TMX dot XML, and my XSLT script that I'll be referencing is TMX dot XSL. Now if I haven't done any typos and I hit enter, I should get a return with no complaints, and that's exactly what happened. I got a return. My command prompt came back and I have no complaints. So I'm going to put this away, and then it says after I do that that I should observe a new file in my folder called mytmx.tmx, and I should open it in my text editor. So that's what I'm going to do, and sure enough I have the new file mytmx.tmx. So I'm going to pull up my text editor again, and I'm going to just take a look at that, and sure enough, if I tell it what language this is, if I tell it it's XML, the syntax highlighting comes back on. So what I have now is a TMX file, which is good, and it's got the necessary metadata information, but more importantly it's got my language pairs. So I've got my English US and my Wookiee pair here. This is fun, which translates into Wookiee language as ga roar humph. I have my second pair, the English string is let's start the ship, and of course Chewbacca would say mwar hack gak humph. And then the third pair is I'm hungry, which is wark yummy. So now we have our translation pairs. This was just a for fun exercise. Please do this exercise to make sure that all of this works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, please let me know and I will help you to troubleshoot it. This is important to do because this will be actually one of the things that you will get credit for when you do it for real as part of one of your deliverables, as explained in the syllabus. And we'll talk about this more. So hopefully that was hopefully that got you started, and hopefully that was even a little bit fun. Let me know if it wasn't fun or if it didn't work for you, and we'll get both of those things fixed up. Okay, so back to the slides. So we've completed the TMX exercise. Let's then talk about TBX. So with TBX, remember when we looked at our case studies, we said, okay, we now have the XLIF file, we have the translation memory file and the TMX file, but what about these terms? What about the possibly ambiguous terms, and what do I do about that? So let's solve that problem here. So we solve that with TBX. TBX is term-based exchange. It's an open standard for representing the structured terminological data, and it's available at that URL there. Translators use TBX to understand and disambiguate terms. Translators know and like, oops, that should be TBX, a typo there. TBX 1.0 specification was passed October 2008, and it comes with a specification and an XML DTD. So let's take a look at all of this. So XML enables tagging of terms. So in this case we have an XLIF file, and I've zeroed in on one of the units, and I have a sentence that reads, the MC5 album Kick Out the Jams was recorded at a, and then I have an inline element here, concert at Detroit's Grande Ballroom, October 1969. Okay, so we've annotated that this is a term, the word concert, in our XLIF file. Okay, so if we Oops, I jumped ahead of myself. So we open that XLIF file in the computer-aided translation tool. This is an old version of that tool. And then we want to set the TB file, the terms file. So we would go to the terms tab and we would set the TBX file. We would select a TBX file that has a bunch of terms in it. In this case, we see that one of the terms is for concert, and it says that it's a musical event. It has a definition there and an optional translation to German. This is not necessarily, the purpose of TBX is not to have the translations, but the more important thing is to have the definition so that the translator can have that. So in this case then, we've opened this file and it's got this term entry which says that this term is a musical event. Its definition is a live performance typically of music before an audience. The term in English is concert, and just optionally we added that the term in German is that word there. Okay, so we then open the XLIF file and we would use the utility, or excuse me, the module called glossary. We don't know about glossary yet because we haven't gone over that in class, but what it does is it interrogates the TBX file. It sees that there was a term that's in the TBX file and also was annotated as a term in the XLIF file, and then it used the GLS namespace to put the XLIF 2.0 glossary module glossary entry there. From there, a translator could disambiguate the word concert. Now, concert's not a very remarkable term. It's not probably very. Most people wouldn't wouldn't confuse it, but there are some technical terms and some ambiguous terms that actually it would help to have this information at hand. So now when the human translator sees this, they say, oh, okay, that's the context of concert. So I'm going to use the appropriate translation when I translate this file. So a more ambiguous example would be, suppose the translator is not familiar with guitars and we've annotated the word, we have the sentence, the strings are strummed and sometimes with a pick. Well, what kind of pick is that? We see a whole bunch of different examples here. There's a basketball pick to pick an apple. There's a pick that you would use with rocks. You could pick a draft pick, or somebody could pick your pocket. In this case, it's none of those things. So by putting the term entry in the TBX, the translator says, ah, this is what you mean by pick, a small thin device of metal or plastic used to pluck a stringed instrument. And they say, okay, that's no longer ambiguous and I know the right translation for that. Okay, so let's do the TBX exercise. So for this exercise, we'll want to download the TBX utility from D2L. We'll want to unzip that in the ET folder, and then we're going to find the TBX utility user guide.doc file and follow the directions. Okay, so let's just do that. Again, this is going to be help you. Please watch me do this, and then do it yourself, and let me know if it doesn't work for you or if it does work for you. But basically, this will be the other part of the project that you'll have to do, or the other deliverable, and you'll get points for it. So please, I'm just going to show you basically how to do it for fun now, but then when we need to do it for the real thing, hopefully you'll have some experience. So we're going to download the TBX utility from the resource files directory in D2L. And again, I'm going to put it right in my ET directory. Okay, so it looks like it's finished downloading. So I will go, and in Windows, I'm just going to right click and say extract all, and I'm going to let it default to here. Okay, so hopefully it's doing that. Yep, it's doing that. Okay, so now on my directory I have, in my ET directory I have TBX utility. If I look into here, I see that I have some files. So let's go through this this exercise. It says to look for the TBX Utility User Guide and follow the instructions. Okay, so here's the TBX Utility User Guide. Make it big so that you can see it. Okay, so in this case, it says that the TBX utility is a command line XSLT utility that converts glossary spreadsheets into TBX files. So the first thing I need to do is to download it, unzip it in my ET directory, and then once I get there, you'll see that there's a template spreadsheet. And in this case, let's just use that template spreadsheet and let's just add to it. So column A is for your English source term. Column B is for the target. You don't this is optional. If you don't have a translation, just put not applicable. Column C is for the subject, and column D is for the definition. Okay, so in this case, I've entered one. I've entered pick, not applicable. It's an accessory, and it's a small, thin device used to pluck a stringed instrument. Okay, so that's what I've added to this. So then we need to save the Excel file spreadsheet as my TBX, .xml. Oh, I need to enable editing. So these instructions are going to be wrong, and I hopefully will fix this before you download it. Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's do all of these steps right up through step 4. Okay, so I'm going to go to my TBX file. I'm going to treat this as a template. I'm going to zoom this a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to add my own new term. I'm going to call it, let's see, let's call it auto. Need to enable that for editing. Okay, let's call it. Our new one is automobile, and I'm going to say that the target term is not applicable, and I'm going to say that this is vehicle. Okay, and I'm going to say it's just making stuff up here. So this is our new entry. I'm going to save this, and then it said that I need to save as, and I'm going to want to save it as XML Spreadsheet. In my case, it's 2003, but as long as you pick the XML Spreadsheet option, you'll be okay. Okay, so then we're going to call it mytbx.xml. Okay, it's going to tell us that it's going to, some of the formatting is not compatible. We're going to say that's okay, and click yes. Okay, so now I'm going to check my directory, and sure enough, I do have mytbx.xml. Again, I could look at that in the text editor, and I see that it's got a bunch of XML, and in there it has columns with and cells and rows with the information that we need, including the new one that I just added here. Okay, so then let's go back to the instructions, and the instructions say that we need to invoke the command line. So on the Mac we would go into Utilities and double click a terminal app. In Windows we would go to Accessories and we would pick Command Prompt. So I've already done that, so I still have that up here. And it says then in our instructions to change directories to the TBX utility. So I still have the command prompt, so I'm going to do a cd space ... And now I'm back in cd space ... And if I do a dir, I see that one of my choices is TBX utility, so I'm going to change directories to TBX-utility. Enter, and do a dir. And again, I see that I have another one, so I have to another layer, so I have to change directories. Actually, I can just do a arrow up, and it says cd TBX Utility. So I'm going to do that. And now I see that I have all of my stuff. So then the next step, it says, is to type in java -jar saxon9.jar -o mytbx.tbx for my output file, mytbx.xml for my input file, and tbx.xsl is the script, that XSL script that's going to make this conversion. So I'm going to do exactly what it says. I'm going to type java space -jar space saxon9.jar space -o for my output directory, call it my tbx.tbx space my tbx.xml space tbx.xsl, and as long as there are no typos, once I hit enter or return, I should see no errors, and I should get the command prompt back, which I do see there. So that looks like it was successful. Let's take a look at our, so the next step, it says, is to observe the new file in the folder called mytbx.tbx, and then to open it in text editor. So let's do that. So I have sure enough, it made the file, and if we open it in text editor and we tell it that this is an XML file to turn on syntax highlighting, we see that it created a TBX file with the metadata we need, plus it has term entries for each of the terms, which is what our XLIF file is going to want to read, including the last term that I just added called vehicle, automobile, vehicle with 4 wheels and engine and seats. So that's kind of crude, but I didn't take a lot of time to fill out the TBX file. So it worked. So what that means is that when we do this as part of our project, you'll want to use meaningful terms from the actual XML file that you've created and submitted to me, so that we can eventually go through this whole workflow, which will give you credit for doing your deliverables. So please do take the time to go through this yourself, do the exercise, and please let me know if you have any trouble with it. Okay, so that concludes our video for today. Hope that all works for you. Please let me know. Thank you.